So in the shop, one of the most important, and I'd say the most used tool in the shop is the workbench. It's where everything gets done. All of your joinery cutting, all of your layout, pretty much everything gets done on a workbench. Now this workbench that you're looking at right now is actually a Paul Sellers design. I will leave a link down in the description. It has laminated 2x6s here, and that makes for a super sturdy, strong workbench top. The main issue with this, and for most people, is they're building it out of construction grade lumber. As I did. It's wet and green, and it has a lot of moisture in it. So as you're probably thinking, this workbench right here is not flat. Not even in the slightest. I actually built this workbench about 2 years ago. I actually remember it was spring break of my sophomore year in high school, and I remember that because it was like the Friday afternoon, we all got off of school, and I went to Lowe's, picked up the lumber, and then that Saturday morning I started the workbench build, and I think it took a week or so. I'm getting off topic, but my point is, it was 2 years ago. After 2 years, it has seen quite a lot of use, and I've actually flattened this down right after it was completely done, and you know, that's right when it's gonna start cracking and warping and twisting. And then it was like 6 months later, I flattened it again. Since then, I haven't, as you can tell, I haven't done anything to it. So you get my point. This board is flat. It is freshly jointed and planed, and I have two sides that are flat, and when I put it on here, it wobbles, and for the last year, it has been driving me crazy. And it gets worse.
I was spinning. I could always tell it was the end of the beginning. When you're coming over here, there's no need for pretending. I'm trying to be careless with the signals that you send in.
Here is the completely empty and naked workbench. I got all the tools cleared out. They're all put over here on the table saw. I got the bandsaw out of the way because when we flatten this, we need the room. And I took the vise off. So I took the screw out, took off the plates. Funny thing to note here, this board right here, this 2x12, it was perfectly snug when I put it in here 2 years ago, and you can tell just how much it has shrunk on both sides. And that's a lesson right there, because wood shrinks in this direction, not in that direction. And here you can also maybe get a little bit better of a look at the unflatness of it. This workbench right here is actually a little bit taller, or a little bit higher than this side here. I showed that with the level. But to my credit, this workbench here was built entirely with hand planes. Not built entirely, but the jointing and the planing and everything was done by hand by me with this little, I think it's a number 5 Stanley plane. And I'd say I got it pretty flat. I was just getting into woodworking and I didn't really know what I was doing when I built this workbench. But now that I do, I know that it's not flat and it needs to be fixed. I'm going to be using a router to flatten this with a big diameter bit, because this is a lot of surface area going back and forth, so I want a large bit to do this, and it's going to be running in a sled, and I'm just going to go back and forth several times. Now I can't take 100% credit for this. The video that I'm actually going to be following along with is actually done by the Wood Whisperer. He is a woodworker here on YouTube, and if you're watching me, odds are you've probably seen at least one or two of his videos. Awesome guy. It probably is a little bit more in-depth than what I'm going to be showing you today. And I guess this is where I should say, this is not a tutorial, this is not a how-to video. This is like I'm doing something and I'm showing it to you. I'm not telling you how to do it. So what I think I'm going to do is make up all the pieces for the sled. I'm going to screw and glue that up. And then while the glue is sitting, I'm then going to take these 2x6s and mount those on both sides. And that I think is going to be the time consuming part, because those have to be perfectly parallel. They have to be exactly on the same plane. They can't be slanted or crooked. They have to be perfect, or as close to perfect as I can get them realistically. So I'm going to probably have to set aside some time to do that properly, and I think having the glue sit while I do that is the best use of our time.
See a picture in my head as I was spinning. I could always tell it was the end of the beginning. When you're coming over here, there's no need for pretending. I'm trying to be careless with the signals that you're sending. I got it.
As you can see, we have a nice opening here for that big router bit. As you saw, I actually cut this out on the table saw, and that's a neat trick if you haven't seen that before. I remember the first time I saw that trick where you raise up the blade, cut, raise it down. I was like, why didn't I think of that? So one thing that I need to do also here is where the vise is mounted, that plate actually sticks out about, I don't know, 3/4 of an inch or so. So I'm gonna need to add a couple spacers on this side, and I think this might be the time where I wish I had 3 hands. Aha! There we go. So like I said earlier, I'm following the Wood Whisperer's video on flattening a workbench. Now I realize I could put clamps on the workbench, set the boards on that, and then clamp it with more clamps, then remove the clamps that were holding the piece. I could have easily watched that video for another minute and then tackled this, but no, I spent another 5 minutes. I'm like, oh, I don't need to watch the video, I'll just do this. That didn't work out very well, but it's done, so I can't complain. So I don't know how, but on my first setup, I guess, of the line, I got it perfect. I don't know how, okay? I don't know how. If I understand this correctly, and I watched the video a couple times to make sure I did, this line right here was put on first, and the second one was put on top over it. But if they are touching in the center, like they are now, then that presumably that they are on the same plane and perfectly in line with one another. Now, if there was a gap in here, the way I would find that is if I actually just touch this up and this didn't start moving at first, but if I got a little bit and then that started moving, that would mean that there would be a gap in the center right there, but there isn't. This is so gnarly.